All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Go ahead and get started. We are starting a new series today in both of our classes, and the one you are in is called Lunchroom Theology, which, I don't know, maybe you're here because you're hungry. I don't know why you signed up for this one, but it's going to be a good conversation. It's based on a book I want to put in front of you guys. I wish I had copies to give you, but we don't. But I want to share it with you so you can go and order a copy if you're interested. It's called Lunchroom Theology, where we got our title, and it's by Heather Gorman and Mark Nelson. Heather was just a few years ahead of me at ACU, so I'd heard that name before, and so I was excited when I saw this book come out. Mike Cope kind of introduced me to it and said, hey, you should check this out, it's really good. And then I also heard Ken Sakrowski, who's a professor at ACU, published something on Facebook about the book. Just lots of rave reviews. And I thought it would be a good conversation for us, especially in the season we're in, which is election season, right? I mean, just the divisiveness is in the air. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to recenter ourselves in the gospel in the way that calls us into one another's lives rather than to separate from one another. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And this morning, a lot of what we're going to be doing is trying to unpack and name the problem. What's the issue? What is underlying the kind of separation and disassociation that we feel from one another? How does that show up in the world around us? And of course, we're going to be using the image of the lunchroom to kind of dive into that. So I want to start with this question. I am just curious, what kind of memories you guys have of the lunchroom? Being a student, middle school, high school, walking into the school cafeteria, what memories come to mind? What was that experience like for you?
It was like the Road Warrior from Mel Gibson.
Okay, help us out. I don't know.
Food fights.
Food fights, okay. Yeah. Good. So sometimes the animosity spilled out in very physical ways. That's good. Yeah. What else do you remember?
There are always friend groups. So you were looking for your friend group, and hopefully they were the same table that you always sit at. Nobody took that table, but it was always like chunks of people, like grouping.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, there seems to be, this is just human nature, because we do the same thing at church. People have their pew, right? Yeah. And there were certain lunch tables that are like, this table seems to be reserved for this group of friends, and this group of friends is over here. And people kind of divide themselves out that way. What else do you remember?
I think she's kind of like cliques.
There's cliques.
Yeah, you got like one group here, one group this area, table this area, one table this area.
Yeah. And that feeling that anxiety too of trying to find your group, right? Where are we today? Yeah.
I didn't have those nice memories.
Mm.
I was always a nerd, so to speak. So everywhere I went, it's taken. So stairs or go wherever I had availability. I didn't have that kind.
Yeah. It's a lonely feeling. Yeah. I mean, that Bobby, I was talking to Bobby this morning, and he talked about Donna is at the Agape conference right now. And she was telling Bobby, like, there's this room full of people, but in that moment, she didn't have anyone to sit with. Right, and there's nothing lonelier than that feeling, right? To walk into a room and you're looking around, scanning, who can I be with, and not finding someone, and then you're just by yourself. Yeah, Harsh.
The process is really rushed, and so like in a school lunchroom, you don't have very much time to eat.
Yeah.
So there's never really, I don't know, there always just seems to be like everything's kind of haphazard, and so it like itself, the time constraint is not conducive to
Yeah.
I don't know, a lot of any meaningful.
That's right.
Interaction.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm judged sometimes for how fast I eat, right? In fact, I went to lunch with Tim Sells. He's preached here a couple times down at Impact Church. We had lunch together one time, and he actually beat me. And he was like, but I was kind of keeping up with him. Like, we were within a few bites of each other. And he was like, finally, someone who eats as fast as me. Like, we had this camaraderie. But I totally blame school lunches for that speed. I mean, it's just like you have to shovel it in and go. I was shocked when Ava told us that in high school they have like 20 minutes, and that includes like getting there to the cafeteria, getting your food. I mean, by the end of all of that, you have maybe 5 minutes to eat.
Teachers have the same amount of time.
Yeah, oh yeah, the teachers too. I mean, it's just insane how little time they're given for that. Yeah, I remember curly fries. That was always a go-to.
Well, they're illegal now.
They're-
Oh, yeah.
Square pizzas, that's right. Yeah, the classic square pizza. What's that, Kevin?
Square pizzas, they're done now.
That's right. Yeah. Food was not always great, but I also have some good memories of the food too.
I do not.
Yeah.
About learning negotiating skills as you trade.
That's right. Yeah, if you brought your lunch, yeah, you might be eyeing someone else who brought theirs. I've got turkey and Swiss today, but peanut butter and jelly's looking pretty good. Are we interested in a trade?
Our kids
Even with
do
those
that.
school meals, you wanted to trade your fruit cup or
That's right.
Our David does that. He told us they have like a group of friends and they have rules for their trading. I never did this. You can't take their entree, but like there's a trading game that every
It's
day-
like the most organized version of Lord of the Flies I've ever heard
He
about.
knows another kid likes because he knows then he'll trade it for something later.
That's awesome.
So bizarre.
I love that, Reggie.
The Donna experience, going into a room and not knowing what it said, I have found, because I kind of look at that dynamic sometimes when I go into a church function or whatever, and a lot of people have that feeling,
Yeah.
where you can feel alone, and so I think we will, by default, go where it's easy. We go, okay, I've got a friend group here, so I'm going to go over there. But and if those seats are not available, then you're forced to kind of do that. But so this is just me. So what I have started doing intentionally is I'll go into a room and then I'll just go to a table by myself, right? And then create an opportunity for people to come and join.
Yeah.
Because other people are in that same thought process. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it works. It's like I'm never alone.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to create a situation that invites other people.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. Yeah. Other memories? Yeah.
I was a little like Reggie, and I would bring my lunch most of the time. And I valued that time because I could relax and talk with whoever
Yeah.
showed up at my table. So if I went and sat at a table by myself or where there was a lot of seats around me, I could be the includer and say, sure, you can sit here.
Yeah.
I'm not saving it for anybody.
Yeah.
And I would get upset with myself because like once a month, I'd finally see something on the menu on a Friday that I could stomach,
Yeah.
And it would take so long to get through that line that I was the one looking for the seat and.
Right. Completely messed up the experience. Yeah. Good.
I remember once at ACU, I was sitting between two guys who, when they chowed down, they ate with their elbows, like this and like this.
Yeah. Kristen knows what that's like.
Happened to be between both of them, and I had to get up and move. So.
Yeah.
Also, I remember in the second grade, Spanish rice. Cheyenne, Wyoming, my dad was stationed there in the Air Force. Cary Elementary School didn't even have a cafeteria. They had to put us on buses and take us 6 blocks to another school that did have a cafeteria.
Oh, wow.
And every Thursday they had Spanish rice. Now, I'm married to
Can you eat Spanish rice now?
No.
Yeah. That's where I thought that story was going.
Mexican food, my wife's a great cook, but it was absolutely nothing but rice and ketchup.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Okay. How many? Hey, come on. How many of you have seen the movie Mean Girls? I have a teenage daughter, so we've watched this on repeat. We've listened to it. There's this scene when they're in the cafeteria, and she's from South Africa, and so she's trying to get the lay of the land in an American high school cafeteria. And so they're kind of helping her out, and they're telling her, all right, here's where this group sits, here's where this group sits, here's where the jocks sit, here's where the nerds sit, whatever. And it's all to help her trying to navigate and understand the social hierarchy that is present in a high school, right? And I'm curious, what group would you have identified with in high school? Did you have a group? What did that look like for you? Nerd? Yeah, right here. Yeah?
I would say, like, I had a few little groups, but I was kind of like Sister Kathy. I didn't really sit with nobody sometimes. So I was kind of a nerd and different things. But fast forwarding, thinking about my lunchroom experience in college, like, we were comedians. We would end up at the cafeteria, because, of course, you know, you a college student, you can't afford nothing else. And so we would reenact, and this might sound crazy, scenes from The Color Purple.
Yeah.
We would be the comedians all throughout the cast. And I also remember, because I was in North Louisiana, they constantly, you knew the day that they was gonna have meat pies. You knew the day when they was gonna have fried chicken. You knew what you was gonna have to, so it kind of was like a shift for me. It was, high school was kind of strange, but then college, it was like, okay, we had a whole comedy show, and still do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
I guess I'll qualify as a square peg in a round hole thing.
Yeah.
Never kind of fit into like one specific group per se.
Yeah.
Kind of nerdy, kind of like hang out with the cool people. Yeah, so pretty much I kind of do like a tennis ball and bounce around. So that's kind of,
Yeah.
that's kind of me.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, Reggie.
So I know you're going there. Do you think we do that in the church?
Not at all, Reggie. What are you talking about? Yeah. Yeah, no, I think we do, don't we? Yeah, for me, there was two groups I sat with. It was either the church kids, like we had South MacArthur Church of Christ, had a table. And I sat with the church kids. And they were my best friends all through high school. Like my closest friends that I actually still keep up with were from the church. And then I was like the fine arts hallway, right? I was in theater and band, and so that was kind of my area too. And so those were my groups that I kind of hung out with. But I think Reggie's right. This translates, whatever group we were a part of in high school, it's kind of a microcosm of what ends up happening later on in our lives too, within the church, but even outside of it. And so I actually want to start by having us kind of work on, if you were helping someone try to figure out the lay of the land and thinking, okay, here's all the groups that you might choose to sit with in the world today. What are the different group options out here? How's the world divided up?
Where do you want to start?
What's that? There's political divide. Yeah. Yeah.
Christian, non-Christian.
Yeah, there's racial divides. One of the most eye-opening things I ever saw was there's something, and I tried to access it and find it again, but I couldn't figure it out. But there's something called the racial dot map, where they take census data and they overlay it onto a map of the United States, and they map all the different racial groups. And it's startling to see, well, here's the white folks, here's the black folks, here's the Asian folks, here's people from India, it's just all these different, and it's crazy how grouped up that is. And of course, there's a history behind that, isn't there, right? Some of that's intentional injustice that's been done. And it's been carried forward, even though those laws have been undone. The consequences of those laws still perpetuate. But yeah, no, we're definitely racially divided, physically, geographically. Yeah.
But not in the church. Here at this congregation, I look around and I see. I'm just waiting for some little child to say, "Daddy, look at all the different people of all the different colors. Isn't it beautiful?" This congregation is. If you're looking for an ethnically diverse congregation, and I don't sense that all the blacks sit here, all the whites sit here, all the Hispanics sit there. I see a beautifully diverse congregation.
Yeah, and I absolutely. And I want us to celebrate that. Actually, that's where we're going to end our conversation today. It's kind of brainstorming and thinking through what that looks like here at BAML. Yeah, Jen.
It's funny that you said that, because I attend Tuesday night Zoom with Gail. And so Tuesday I was looking at the screen and I was like, I'm the only one that looks like me.
Mm.
But I felt totally comfortable. And I didn't recognize that I did.
Yeah.
And I just kind of glanced and I was like, oh gosh, this is like beautiful. Like growing up in the city, I was late 60s, but then the 70s.
Yeah.
That, I would have never experienced that.
Yeah.
But that Tuesday night, that was like beautiful.
Yeah.
I felt so comfortable. I just felt like we were all one. I didn't recognize it until I glanced at the screen.
I love that, Jen. Yeah, that is such a beautiful story. And a picture of what BAML is.
That's
Right?
exactly what it was. And
Yeah.
yesterday when we visited Jamie, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
These are my people, regardless of all kinds of things that could divide us.
yes.
Yeah. I love that.
David, I grew up in between two brothers, only girl. But we was always taught love has no colors.
Mm.
So when you look at people, you give people the love that you want back. It's not about the race, about the colors or whatever. That's why it felt so comfortable.
Mm.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I agree and appreciate everything that has been said, but I don't think that we get to a place like we are here by accident.
Yeah, that's
Just
right.
Wake up and we're there. I think
That's right.
there's some intentional thought behind that. I know some of BAML's history, and there has been some choices that were made that has facilitated our being who we are. One being, I think Gerald mentioned it last Sunday, when the church had an opportunity to relocate because of the changing of the dynamics of this community.
Right.
The church leadership made a choice to stay here and serve this community irregardless of the change. And that's a huge thing to me. That's one of the reasons why I placed membership here, because I was so impressed with that love to serve God, irregardless of racial changes, socioeconomic changes, and all that. But I guess just reemphasize my point. I think we have to be careful not to think that there's not work involved in achieving a multi-ethnic, multi-social economic type of environment, even in the church.
That's right. Yeah, and work yet to be done still, right? But it's not perfect. We're still there's still work out ahead of us as we continue to grow closer together, right? And even protecting what we have, right? Because we can lose that. Yeah, Harv.
Age.
Yeah, age. Absolutely. Yeah.
All sit together.
What's that?
The teens
teens all sit. We need to break them up. We need to. Yeah.
Is there up front now instead of way in the back? Like it used to be?
Yeah. No, I do think about how central the teens are to our worship, though. Right? That I will tell you, Derek misses them when they're gone. There's so much energy right there on the front row as we're singing. And in some ways they lead us, right? I mean, who are the first ones to stand up during a song? Which sometimes I know some of us are tired and we don't want to stand up again. We're like, but they have a presence and they're leading us in ways. And to see the ways they're engaged in the life of our congregation, it's a beautiful thing. And again, resisting some of the ways this could look, right? Because man, I don't know if you feel this, whether with your kids or with your parents or grandparents, but there is this generational gap in how we see the world, right? I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people my age who are almost kind of not talking to their parents anymore because of differences often up here. But it's just kind of a philosophy of how they see the world. And there's such stark differences. Man, how do we even talk to one another? So this is a big one, I think. Yeah.
I can remember several years back when we were meeting on Wednesday night, there was a discussion group or a panel, and you remember Sherry Reeves was on it? And they were trying to tell the teens that even though we may be old right now, when we were younger, we had the same desires that you do.
Yeah.
We fought the same battles. And yes, the world is different, but we had some same issues that you're having now.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
Don't think that you're completely alone. Don't think we don't understand.
That's right.
But it still takes a couple of years to decide that your parents know the
That's very true. It is so funny to me rewatching movies that I watched as a kid, because when I was a kid, it was like, yeah, no, the kid is right. And now I'm watching it as a parent, I'm like, why are they not listening to the parent? Like, they do what your parents tell them to do. Yeah, that's funny how that shifts over time.
And you use that argument on your kids?
Yeah, that's right.
Don't do what they do, listen to me.
That's right. You need to listen to me.
I think leading into the racial situation that Bridget kind of opened the door for that conversation is that we paid a price to be a diverse congregation. In 2002, our preacher was Sean Smith. We had a meeting. We said we want to become racially diverse and inclusive. So we started to put people of color in visible places in reading ministry, speaking ministry with the offering, thought, communion. And I will never forget, one day we had the majority of our greeters were black. And a white woman came up to me and said, don't they have their own church? We have too many black greeters. So that was 2002. Fortunately, we're not in that place now, but we paid a steep price. And there was a lot of blood that was shed over that, spiritual blood.
Yeah, and look at the gift that we've gotten from that. You know, it's that treasure buried in the field. You give up a lot to get something even better, right? Yeah. What other divides are there? If we're looking around the lunchroom, what groups are there? Yeah.
Maybe family divides. I mean, singles versus couples and small children.
Yeah. What do I call that?
Family status.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard economic status. Absolutely. And just like that racial dot map, the same thing is true for economic too, right? Different neighborhoods that don't tend to coincide together. In fact, this is fascinating. I recently read this book on rural areas, and it talked about there are places where there's less distance between different economic neighborhoods, right? So rich folks are living with poor folks. And the way that actually changes the way they see each other, and there's more diversity of thought in these places. In places where they're separated, they tend to kind of, each person's kind of in their own echo chamber, and they're just kind of living their lives without any thought about the experience someone else might be having, right? So if you're wealthy and you've got some privilege and your wealth can buy you into a lot of different places, and you never see what it's like to be poor, you're going to see the world a certain way, right? And you're going to be closed off and have certain thoughts about people who may not have the same experiences as you. And so it's important to be living in close proximity. That changes the way you see the world.
Maybe there's occupations too. They may be the same economic status, but, someone thinks, well, their mom or their dad does so-and-so, I don't want to be with them.
Yeah. His dad's the preacher. We don't want to spend. I think it's like one of the first things that often gets asked when you're meeting someone is what? What do you do for work? And behind that is kind of a social status check, right? Or we probably don't mean it that way, but I think often there's underlying that question. Yeah.
Put religion versus science.
Yeah, religion. So you've got, I think there's multiple divides, right? Multiple ways this divides us, right? There's multiple religions. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all those. But then you also have science and religion and the way those seem to be opposed. Yeah, absolutely. It's good.
But then you come across people like, who was the head of the science department at HCU? Remember the salt vaccine research? I can't remember one of his departments.
There are absolutely people who embody the kind of the bridging that divide, for sure. But that can be a way that we get divided. Yeah. What else? Culture. Yeah. Say more, Jen.
Oh, you say, okay.
Oh, yeah. Say more about that.
So I can
Yeah.
Like some things I could talk about or experience that my friends didn't and vice versa.
Mm.
And it's because of the culture that we were raised in.
Yeah.
You know, it could be the same neighborhood, or we could look the same, but then there's things that maybe great-grandmother experienced that brought into the family.
Right. And I've experienced this even living in different parts of the country, right? My mom is from Massachusetts, and she married a Texas boy, right? There's some culture differences there, including what we eat at Thanksgiving. She keeps trying to serve us mashed turnips every Thanksgiving, and none of us are having it. We've turned it into a rite of passage every time someone new is added to the family. But there's absolutely culture differences, even with people who you would expect to be very similar. Yeah.
Let's get male and female.
Traditions, absolutely. What were you saying, Brenda? Male and female, absolutely.
And traditions in the church, I mean, goodness, if you visit other private churches, there's all sorts of different philosophies. I.e. the black church, there's an emphasis on saying brother, so I call you brother Ayres as opposed to David, and the way you dress is different sometimes, black, white, and so there's some differences, and then the way we sing sometimes,
the
songs that we sing, and then you bring that together, and then you've got an opportunity for cross-pollination, which is good.
That's right.
But also conflict, which you've got to work through.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, Harv.
Geography kind of, all these divides are represented there, but someone from, as you said, someone from the Northeast is going to have a different way of looking at things and expressing, worshiping. I think in the South, a lot of churches are a lot more, people are, because I go to the Catholic Church, I see this a lot, but a lot more willing to be expressive.
Yeah.
In the North, a lot more reserved.
Yeah.
And those differences kind of overlay all of these other differences.
That's right. Yeah. I think I've told this story in a sermon before, but Kristen had a boss, used to have a boss that worked in Israel, that was from Israel. And he would come to Arkansas where we were living and go and talk to different people. And people didn't always appreciate his presence. And sometimes he would hear the phrase, "Bless your heart." Which he thought, oh, you people are just everyone blesses me. This is such a wonderful place. You're so welcoming. And Kristen at one point had to say, no, they're cussing you out in Southern. That is not a blessing. Geography and culture, traditions, right? That all plays a part. And this piece is actually really, really big. Part of what we're going to talk about is what you'll discover in this book is geography, and the way geography has shaped us actually has a profound impact on the ways we are stratified socially. So there's this book called The Big Sort by Bill Bishop. And he did a lot of social research, and what he found is that since the 70s, people have started sorting themselves geographically by age, income, education, race, politics, all these things that we've named already. People are making intentional choices to go and find the neighborhoods where there are people who look and think and act like them, right? And this is fascinating to me. So in the course of this research, he learned it. So in 1976, less than a quarter of Americans, less than 25%, lived in places where the presidential election was a landslide. That is like one party or the other completely blew out the other party in that county, right? Only 25% of people lived in a county that looked like that. Fast forward to 2004, half of all people lived in a county where it was a complete blowout, one side or the other. And then in 2016, anyone want to venture a guess? 80% of people lived in a landslide county. I mean, the geography has completely shifted in the ways we're rubbing shoulders with people who are different than us. And all of this, the less time we spend together, it just increases the problem, right? And so we think about what they call the laws of group polarization. It's interesting, maybe you've experienced this in real life. The more time people spend with people who agree with them, the more radicalized they become in their views, right? Now, I can see this. All you have to do is go on 2 different social media platforms, okay? Right? My Facebook feed, now there is all kinds of stuff on there, right? But it is made up of people I actually know in real life, right? Which means there's a whole diversity of different views and people. Twitter is not like that. It's not the people I know in real life. It's people I choose to follow, right? And Twitter quickly becomes an echo chamber. Some of the most outrageous, crazy things I have ever read are on Twitter. Whether it's people who I tend to think alike, and I'm hearing those things, I'm like, whoa, you took that way too far. Or it's people reacting to what they've heard on other sides of issues. But it is way more radical in the echo chamber of that social media platform, whereas Facebook, usually in Facebook, like people will post crazy stuff, but there's always at least 1 or 2 people who are like, let's just learn to get along. Like maybe we shouldn't say this on social media, right? That is completely absent on Twitter. It's like, yeah, gasoline on the fire. Let's make this more out of control. But that happens to us. Like the more we spend time in that echo chamber with people who think like us, the more we just are convinced that we're right. And it's interesting, too, the ways in which group loyalty affects the way we think. Right? You know, you're thinking about the different tables, right? And you want to be able to sit with your friends. And just like in high school, there are certain things that might risk your status and your welcome into your group. What you've got to do is make sure the rest of the group accepts you, right? And that still plays out in adult behavior all the time, too. And over things that you wouldn't think even mattered. Okay, so there's this fascinating experiment where they picked 7 people, and 6 people were in on it. Okay, and here's what they were assigned to do. They showed them a line. All right, this is our line. And they said, okay, I'm going to show you 3 different lines. I'm going to get this as close as I can. You'll get the idea. And your job, use these volunteers, is to pick which line matches this line. All right, everyone in the room, which of these 3 lines matches that line, first line? Middle one, obviously, right? Now, here's what they did. They had 6 people who were kind of in on it. And they said, all right, what's your job is to pick the wrong line, right? Like, oh, no, it's this line. Which line matches? This line, this line, this line, this line. And then the 7th person was the person they were actually testing. And they get up, and they're like, well, I thought I knew the answer. But I might be the crazy one, right? You start to question yourself, and you also don't want to lose social status. And so 37% of the time, you saw everybody in the room got this right? But when people have experienced that, they've heard 6 of their friends say the wrong thing, 37% of the time they said the same thing their friend said, even though it's obvious. That's the way social connection shapes us. It can shape us for good and bad, but it's so hard not to follow along with what your group is doing and thinking. And we start to rationalize everything. Why? Because we don't want to lose our access to the group. We don't want to feel lonely. We don't want to feel like we don't belong. And so we keep the status quo. And all of this becomes disconnection, right? That's what all of this is fueling, is disconnection between one another. Because the more we're siloed into our little group, and the less we're coming in contact with other people who think differently, we almost lose our capacity to connect with people who are different than us. It's almost like if I'm going to have any connection at all, it's what it's going to look like is finding the people who look and think and act just like me. And I'm just going to camp out here. And disconnection comes because of some different things, right? So they talk about the 3 Ds of disconnection. The first is distance. We're disconnected from people we have distance from. If we're not in proximity, if we're not around them, if we're not hearing them, that fuels disconnection. Then what that becomes is distortion. What happens when we're never around actual people who think differently than us? We start creating straw men, right? Oh, this is what they said. Well, that's actually not exactly what they said. Or we view our view of them as distorted because we're never around them in person, which then breeds distrust, right? It's hard to trust someone that you're convinced is the enemy. Or is completely against everything you stand for. And it's fascinating. You can see this. This is why road rage exists, right? Is the distance, right? And the distortion and the distrust. Like all those things play out in road rage. Because I think this was from a comedian, but like, can you imagine being in an elevator with someone who may do the same exact thing that someone would do with you on the road? They cut you off as you're walking into the elevator or something, or they press the button right as you were about to press it. And can you imagine unleashing your rage on that person when they're standing 2 feet away from you, right? Most of us know. But all of a sudden, when we get into our cars and we know they can't hear us, and we're over here, and all of a sudden, it's just like our rage explodes. And it's like, that person is a stupid, blah, 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 right? We keep all that inside when we're actually face-to-face with someone. And the same thing with social media, too, right? People say all kinds of things on social media they would never say in person, which is what I try to keep in mind around this time of year, right? That our best selves are not present on our online personas because there's enough distance from face-to-face contact that we distort one another and we begin to distrust one another. And all of that can ultimately lead to, if we're not careful, it can descend into dehumanization. That's the last D. Where we are seeing others legitimately as enemies, less than human, in order to fuel our own righteous indignation towards them, right? They deserve what they're getting. And if we're not careful, man, that we can slip into that on all these different areas, all these different categories, all these different ways we're divided from one another. And here's what's fascinating to me. You would think that in a world where all of us are kind of huddled together with the people who are like us, that less of us would feel lonely. And the exact opposite is true. Now, why might that be? Well, I think it has everything to do with the fact that we don't actually have belonging when we're in groups of people who are just like us. What we have is, I get to present you the persona that is accepted by this group, right? Your whole self, your full self, your true self can't show up in that without risking rejection, right? You've got to hold the party line in order to have access to this group, to belong here, which is so different than actual belonging that comes from respect for other people, valuing diversity of opinion, bearing with one another, trying to be humble. Like all of those are skills that are completely lost when the only task is, I'm going to toe the party line so I don't lose access to the group, right? So Brene Brown says this, while we may all be gathered behind the same bunkers of political and social belief or ideology, we're still alone in them. And even worse, we're constantly monitoring ourselves. The looming threat of blowback, should we voice an opinion or an idea that challenges our bunker mates, keeps us anxious. When all that binds us is what we believe, rather than who we are, changing our mind or challenging the collective ideology, what everyone thinks, is risky. When a group or community doesn't tolerate dissent and disagreement, it forgoes any experience of inextricable connection. Nothing can separate us. There's no true belonging, only an unspoken treaty to hate the same people. This fuels our spiritual crisis of disconnection. Right? That's what's happening to us, right? Spikes in loneliness and anxiety, and everything in us, when we're feeling that, tells us, okay, go find your people. Go find your people because I feel lonely and isolated and disconnected. And it's actually the opposite of what we need to be doing. What we actually need to be doing is cultivating community, pushing these tables together, as this book will help us think through. And this is where we only have like 5 minutes left, but this is where I want to return to Reggie's comment at the beginning. Like, what does that look like, or what has that looked like in churches of Christ in particular, but in BAML too. And what might we at BAML have to offer to this situation? How can we offer a redeeming word? What does that look like for us?
You know, one thought, I think we can be intentional about our life groups. Try to make sure that our life groups are diverse. Those are small groups where if we have diversity there, we're not just inviting people who look like us per se, then we have that opportunity to learn from each other, learn from different cultures.
That's right. This is why we invited Bobby and Donna into ours, so we have some old people.
I think when we serve side by side,
Yeah.
as I think about all the different serving groups at BAML, they all have tangible diversity of age and race. And so when we come together on Sunday morning, there's a bond that's forged when we're serving alongside each other.
Yeah.
And we see each other differently. And we're able to bear with each other and give and extend grace.
Mm.
And I think that's a crown jewel for BAML.
Absolutely.
I think all the serving groups, there's tangible diversity in every one of them.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's something happens when you're serving with someone. I mean, there's just a bond that's created there. Yeah.
I think old and new members alike, the sense of inclusion is there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really too common.
Yeah, like getting enfolded immediately, right? And feeling there's a place here. Yeah, Kevin?
Similar to that, you basically kind of like sticking my neck out, because I've been in the beginning of this century, and I've seen the 21st century, let me clarify that. And I've seen like the demographics change. I mean, when I started coming here, I mean, pretty much I was like a little fish in a big pond, and I used to think this was a big pond because we had like, what, close to like 1,500 members here. And I kind of like stuck my neck out and said, hey, I want to feel like I belong, and luckily I got invited to be part of the life that is here at BAML, and here 20 some odd years later, still feeling like this is home.
I love that.
Just make it feel like that this is home, and feel like, hey, you're loved, you're supported, no matter what. And that's, yeah.
I love that. Thanks for that. Hey, Josh.
And to add to that, just being intentional. And the first thing that keeps coming to mind is, for example, the crisis team. When you're in crisis, it's like to watch the group, even, and I think about it during the hurricane, for us to all come together and serve and be intentional about making sure that everyone is okay. And being intentional is life-changing, I feel like, for me, because it's like you get to know other people, their circumstances, and how you can support them along the way.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys being here. I'm looking forward to this series and these conversations that we're about to have. Let me pray for us, and then we'll go worship together. Father, I am so thankful for the gift of this community, the blessing that it is to us gathered in this room, the ways that we have found belonging and connection that is real and not based on any kind of exterior circumstance that we might have. It's not the accidents of history that buy us welcome into this group, but rather the fact that we belong to you, that we are your beloved child, and that we want to treat one another as if that is actually true. Father, I pray that you would pour your blessing onto us in that regard, that we might continue to be that kind of community, not only for ourselves, but as a place of refuge from the kind of divisiveness that we see out in the world, that we might be a place where others can call home too, just as we have. We thank you for all this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Let's go worship.